Hello, viewers. It is I, Jinzo Fighter. We're trying something a little different tonight. This is a CreepyPasta reading. It apparently has to do with Slender Man. This is my first time reading it. It's called Kill the Killers, and apparently it's a parody creepypasta. It has a rating of 8 out of 10 with 2,582 votes cast, but let's see if it actually deserves that rating. Without further ado, let's begin. The shack was dark, almost too dimly lit for a normal person to see into. But he was used to it. After years of wandering the darkness, his eyes had accustomed to the absence of light. The only source of luminance was the screen of a small computer, too old to do more than simply process small internet searches. In the quiet light of the monitor, his features were simply made out. He was grotesque by the most basic of standards. Nothing about him was recognizable as human. His eyes were bloodshot with the inability to blink, and due to the lack of eyelids, mounds of crust formed where the tear ducts should have been. The sickening shade of white that colored his face and the rest of his body was a nauseating bone color, and the scars were the most disturbing part, the burns that had healed up causing flaking and a horrible sheen in some areas. Wait, what the hell was a sheen? Anyway, this man was no longer human, neither in body nor in spirit. The small amount of emotion left in him was simply rage. Love was as non-tangible to him as the moon. He sat there staring at his screen, his askew mouth agape in horror as he read. The looks of disgust that registered in his disfigured face would make many believe he was watching the BME Pain Olympics final round. It was, in fact, much worse. In front of his eyes unfolded the most disturbing things he had ever envisioned. Some female had written something beyond legible, passing almost into the infantile. A shudder passed down his disordered visage. Her claims of carnal knowledge of his body disturbed him, and even slightly nauseated him. This was enough for him. He stood up from his kneeling position on the unsound floor, grabbed his knives, and headed to a nearby house. Quickly and silently he moved around the place. This was no time for his normal theatrics. There was no prelude, no go to sleep that had made him famous. No, the butchering was quick and simple. I was apparently wrong. Fuck me. This is about Jeff the Killer, not Slenderman. Jeff the Killer needed to make a phone call. The situation was out of hand. "Take him down!" She screamed at the top of her lungs at the television set in front of her. Almost as disturbing to look at, Jane could care less. Anymore, that is. All those years ago, she would have killed Jeff, given half a chance. These days, however, she rarely ever ventured into the daylight. Her marred beauty no longer hurt her the way it had once. Now she sits around during the day watching pro wrestling. For some reason, she got it into her head that it would be possible to find a new rival here. Reconciling her differences with Jeff had left her completely bereft of an opponent worthy of her talents, all because they tried to hook up a couple of years ago. Jane nearly choked on her soda at the thought of that travesty. The ringing of the phone snapped her out of her thoughts. Who the hell was calling her? "City Morgue, you stab them, we slab them. How may I take your order today?" She answered the phone laughing. "What the hell, Jane?" the voice on the other end quizzed. "Did you take some kind of fucked up Abby pills today?" Jane's eyes narrowed and she growled into the receiver. "Listen here, you charred briquette. Just because I no longer want to kill you for maiming me does not mean that I won't should you piss me off." Jane sighed. She just wanted to be whimsy. Was that so wrong? "Blah, blah, blah. I have something that we need to take care of, and as soon as possible, if you don't mind." Jeff was exasperated. Jane thought on what he was saying as he explained everything to her. Jumping onto her computer, she listened to him talk. CreepyPasta.com was typed carefully into the web browser. Her annoyance hit the fan in less time than it would take to get Miley Cyrus to lick a piece of construction equipment. "What the holy shit is this?" Jane yelled out loud. Forgetting Jeff was on the phone, she proceeded to begin a rant that caused every nun in the state to begin praying for no apparent reason. Fuck, shit, fuck. Jane was just swearing to slur at this point. Why the hell would I wear a mask? Or have kids? All they do is eat, shit, and scream. Like I really want to deal with that bullshit. Jane quickly gathered her own set of knives and headed over to her friend's place. Entering into the broken-down college in the middle of the woods, a tall and dark figure ducked below the crossbeam. His most recent workout with his personal trainer, Hans, left his tendrils feeling like jello. Okay, apparently this doesn't involve Slenderman. Never mind. Slenderman sat down in his lazy boy chair and had just propped his feet up when there was a bang on the door. Sighing, he stood up and dragged his sore, overly long limbs to the door. Standing at the crumbling entrance was Jeff and Jane, both looking utterly pissed off. "Yo, Slendy, my man, we have a major problem," Jeff started off right away. Dragging Slenderman to the computer in the back room, Jeff proceeded to show him the worst story he had ever found on the internet. You mean this one? By the end, Slenderman was puking out the window into his garden. Jeff tried not to envision what it was like for a man to purge when he had no mouth. After a while, the three of them sat in a circle, discussing how they were going to deal with their problems, and it was decided that they would all target an altar to destroy. The method of destruction would correlate directly to the offense that was written. Jane stood outside her target's house. A 15-year-old female whom had felt it was okay to tell a story in which she inserted herself into the Jeff/Jane the Killer world. Jane's inner grammar Nazi began to emerge. The complete lack of commas had her seeing red. Having made sure the girl's parents had left the house, Jane snuck in, climbing the stairs slowly, careful not to creak. She made her way to the female's room. Carefully, she looked into the crack of the door the girl was typing away on her keyboard. Jane decided to drop the quiet approach and kicked in the door. The girl's head whipped around. The second her eyes registered the form before her, a squeal of excitement escaped her adolescent lips. "Oh my God!" The girl jumped up from her computer chair and began to jump around the room like a freaking maniac. Jane looked around the room in horror. Every wall was plastered with fan-rendered images of her and Jeff, some naked, some in compromising positions. Agitation quickly replaced the disgust, and quick as lightning, Jane pulled out some rope. The girl didn't even seem to notice what was going on. She was still in random, taco, middle school mode. Her ramblings were too fast to even make sense. Something about wanting to get Jeff's phone number off of her so that she could rub it in the face of quote-unquote besties. Jane snapped and trussed the girl up faster than a cowboy at a hog tying contest. Standing back, she admired her handiwork. Then she grabbed the keyboard off of the computer desk. The girl started crying, a thing that Jane pointedly ignored. Pulling out her knife, she popped off a key on the keyboard. "Do you know what the most used letter in the English language is?" She giggled at the hysterical girl. "It is the letter E." Jane screamed it at her face, forcing the key down the girl's throat. You see, when people completely ignore the basic constructs of the English language, I get a bit testy. Jane was now screaming like a banshee. "You use question marks when asking a fucking question, dipshit!" The question mark key was the next to be stuffed into the girl's gullet. One by one, Jane shoved every key down the girl's throat, forcing her to literally eat the words she had butchered, then published on the internet. Taking the now-bearing keyboard, she pulled back and smacked it across the girl's face. The girl sat there crying, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth, snot dripping from her nose. Her stomach was horribly distended, and she was having difficulty breathing. She looked up at Jane trying to speak, but was met with cold, heartless eyes. Jane grabbed her knife and slowly made her way over to the broken girl. Her smile was sadistic, lopsided with the uneven pull of burned and scared muscle on her face. With a thrust, she drove the knife into the girl's stomach, slicing it open. The eaten keys poured out. By now, the girl only had moments left to live. She was unable to cry, let alone speak. Jane stood there smiling at her, watching as the light faded from her eyes. Turning around, she grinned evilly at the webcam that was mounted on top of the desktop monitor. The face on the screen stared in sheer terror. "Pass on the literature lesson," Jane said, and turned and walked out of the room. I believe that is all we have time for, so tune in next time for part 2 of Kill the Killer.